Welcome to the Good Builder podcast. Today we have a very special guest and we're actually podcasting from Dwayne Pierce's Level Up experience. And I've actually been pretty intrigued with this guy because I have seen him have a look at what we're doing. I've had a very good look at what he's doing and he's a bit of a legend. So let's meet Craig Stuart.
Thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it. And it's an honour to be here, to be on the podcast.
Oh, mate, thank you very much. Well, Craig, tell us a little bit about yourself and your history, mate. I want to see where it all started, how long you've been in the game, and what have you been doing?
Mate, I'm going to have to show my age now.
Yeah, go for it.
Mate, started, right back at the beginning. Didn't really like school, didn't click at school.
Yeah.
Sort of said to my dad that I wanted to get out, and he's basically said, if you get yourself a job, you can leave school. So around grade 10.
Yeah, wow.
Anyway, got myself a job, got on with a guy at Noosa who owned a cabinet making shop. That's where I initially started, was in the cabinet making shop, but he was a semi-retired builder.
Yeah.
And he still run building sites with his sons.
Yeah, wow.
So one of the sons asked me to do some weekend work for him, building a new house.
Yep.
And from there, I ended up doing 2 apprenticeships. So I did carpentry joinery.
Wow.
And then I did cabinet making as well. So
Yeah.
I did dual apprenticeships.
Yep.
Which I think has lent a lot to my finesse and my fine and detail.
Yeah.
In what I do and how we do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
And I also was one of the first 10 apprentices to be in a training scheme. So right back, it was a mob called Scraggle, which was a Sunshine Coast Regional Group Apprenticeships Limited.
Yeah.
And my boss didn't actually put me on as an apprentice until that scheme started.
Yeah, wow.
And I'm very grateful for it because he went broke during the time, which then relocated me to be able to finish my apprenticeship.
Far out.
So
what a story.
Yeah, so there was only 10 of us that started in that scheme. And obviously today, training companies are quite a big thing.
Yeah.
And I've done all my apprentices through training companies apart from my last 2.
Yeah.
And one was our son and then another young guy.
Wow,
but other
Craig.
than that, I've had around 30 apprentices that we put through in the years.
Yeah.
So, did all that sort of stuff. Early 80s, the industry died a fair bit and I went out west on station for a couple of years.
Yeah, wow.
Very much, grew up on the land, horse orientated. So spent a couple of years out there. And once they knew I had a bit of background in carpentry, I ended up, building sheds as well as doing mustering and all those sort of things and learning life skills.
They found you pretty handy, mate.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Moved around a couple of stations, did some contracting. I come home for Christmas in would have been 87.
Yeah.
And Expo was starting.
Yeah, wow.
And up home, there was a big company in Gympie called Prongers.
Yep.
And they did a lot of work and they had aluminium joinery and cabinet makers and joiners and stuff. Anyway, they were doing work at the Expo 88.
Yeah, wow.
So I ended up working at Expo in the construction side of it.
Yeah, wow.
So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But when that finished...
So was that commercial, sorry, Craig? Commercial construction, or was it?
It was commercial, but based on residential.
Yeah, cool.
Because we were doing the amusement park. So we're building all the counters and the bench tops and all the partitioning walls. Yep. It wasn't so much the big structure itself, it was the fit out side of stuff.
Yep.
So that was like in 88 and we were doing what they call mirror tone finishes on counter bench tops.
Yep.
So we were making it out of MDF, like double thickness, 32 mil stuff.
Yeah. And
then they were sanding them and painting them and polishing them a colour that would reflect like a mirror.
Wow.
Back then. Like we had our own special spray booth, customised spray painters in there.
Jeez.
Like it was really, looking back at it now,
that would have been really innovative for the time.
Yes, it was well ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And as a young guy, you don't appreciate what you're doing until later on.
Yeah.
But learned some awesome skills and have taken that throughout my career.
Yeah.
And then when that finished, basically the work finished overnight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I ended up back on the sunny coast at a cabinet making place.
Yep.
Because I had history in that.
Yeah.
Doing work there for a guy. And that sort of lasted for a little while, but I just realised it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I was 22 at this stage, and I went out and worked for myself.
Wow.
So I worked for myself since I was 22. I've just turned 58.
Yep.
I've sort of cracking up 40 years in the industry.
Wow.
And there's a lot of learning curves throughout that time. You start off doing small jobs and you employ a person, and there was no collaboration and no education from becoming a apprentice to a leading hand to a supervisor to a tradie, and then taking it on by yourself.
Yeah.
And there's all the breakdowns of carpentry to business owner.
Yeah.
And it's not until we talk about things like the level up experience and the live life build and those things where we're getting this sort of collaboration now and the education. I mean, I don't have regrets, but if I could turn back time 10, 15, 20 years
Yeah.
and know what I know now. And a lot of
Yep.
people say that, but
Yeah.
just in the building game, we'd be so much better off.
Yeah.
And I'd be better off, and I would have been able to help other people be better off.
Yeah.
As well along the way.
Yeah. But you went through that near 40 years, and you did everything, you learned everything, you went through different experiences. And what I think is so cool about you is you're happy to share them now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you've probably gone through everything, Craig.
Yeah, we have. We've gone through the highs and the lows, and your clients that you say are bad clients, but are they bad clients, or did you not execute it properly?
Yeah.
You know, and there's clients out there that will take advantage.
Yeah.
But then you also put yourself out there. You think they're your friend.
Yeah.
And you lose the business aspect and become a friend aspect.
Yeah.
And it's your own detriment.
Yeah.
You know, so when you look back and you sort of think, okay, well, that's actually my fault. You know,
Yeah.
I created that because I didn't stick to the guns. I didn't sign the variation. We did it on a verbal agreement.
Yeah.
And then they don't want to pay you.
Yeah.
And you think they're the worst person, but you've created some of those problems yourself.
Yeah.
You know? So there's a lot of learning curves, a lot of mistakes, a lot of hurdles.
Yeah. And it's because I think too, Craig, like talking about that, and sorry to cut you, mate, but like the relationship is so close with a client, isn't it? Like you said, it's 9 months and I call it a marriage. We used to call it a marriage at GJ's. It's almost like you're marrying them because you get involved with them and then you're there for years until you divorce them when maintenance is done and things like that. And it's like, you've got to be really careful who you choose. And I know you sort of talked about that, you know, just before we jumped on the pod.
Yeah, it is. It's important to get the right match, the right fix, you know, like the collaboration together. Like you said, a marriage, you know, you marry the wrong person, life's going to be hell.
Yeah.
You know, and I think learning now about pre-construction, you know, by probably the last 5 or 6 years, you know, changing the dynamics of our business and actually getting involved in the pre-construction and being able to give people the education and explain to them where their money's going and why it's costing this much money and where they can save the money. Yeah. So, you know, being involved in the design, we're not the designers, but be able to give them guidance, you know, throughout that project, and having the designer, the client and the builder all on the same page, all talking together, collaborating together to get the best result. And with the costing of building today, being able to get them to understand why things cost so much. You know, you don't have to tell them every cent, but where they need to spend the money wisely. And you're not there to tell them what to spend it on, but you're giving them the information to make a informed decision. Which is really important, you know. And
that's a big part of your role as a builder, isn't it? It's educating the client. Like, you really have to do that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, education is just key. It's next level. And you'll learn too whether that client is a good fit. So early in the piece, you can either
I like how you spoke about that.
Cut that off, or continue through that. And that pre-construction for us is what we call the pack process, and you've no doubt heard Dwayne talk about that. It gives us the ability to collaborate with the client and get them on board and make that union, or find out that they're not the right suit. They've got too high expectations, you know, or they just aren't respecting your boundaries. You know, we've had a client that didn't respect our boundaries. We'd set times on when we're available for phone calls, what our business hours were, and all those sort of things. And we ended up cutting that off. And look, he wasn't happy about it. And he sort of said, "Oh, look, you know, I've paid you for this." I said, "Yeah, but I've delivered what I was asked to do. You know, I've done your proposals, we've reevaluated, we've gone back, and it just isn't a good fit." So then you just explain to them that, you know, they need to find someone else and look after your own interest. Because, you know, for a lot of years, I was always trying to please the client. You know, I'm a great believer that builders are people pleasers. And sometimes they'll put their own self or their own family, you know, not a jeopardy, but like put them to the side to try and get that client. Because you think that every client you need, every job you need, there's so much work out there. And if you pick your market where you want to be and stick to your guns, I think that you're a lot better off. And I've always been finicky on my jobs, and over the years I've got a lot of pushback from trades and people like that, thinking that I'm too fussy with my workmanship. And they're like, "Oh, you don't need to do that, just slap it up, whatever." And it's great now for me that there's a lot more builders that are communicating, collaborating, and wanting to get that finesse on the end of the job. And that's really inspires me more to keep doing what I do.
You're very proud in your work.
I am very proud, you know, and my team, they have a saying, "Is it Craig good?" You know, when
that's cool.
When we're looking at how things are finishing and that sort of stuff, and they'll often have a little dig and go, is this Craig good? You know, because I look for the extra 1%.
Yep.
You know, the code or the legislation might say this, but we want to go that little bit further and just put that final finesse to it.
Yeah.
And I sort of say to my team, if you wouldn't do it at home, don't do it in someone else's house.
Yeah. I think we're going to use that, mate. I'm going to use this on the pod now. Is it Craig good?
Yeah.
Because I think that's super cool, and I think that shows leadership. It shows you setting the standard for the team, and that's where they want to go. And, and mate, that's a good builder.
Yeah, that's what I believe in. You know, set the expectations.
Yep.
Educate your team on the expectation of what you're trying to achieve. Because I sell that expectation to my client.
That's right.
Why do they want to use me? Because I'm going to deliver this, this, and this. So my team have to want to deliver the same.
100%.
You know, and then letting them understand that sometimes it might take longer than I'd like it to. But we need to get the result. Because next time we do it, we're a bit quicker and a bit quicker. And the other one I find really important too is that if they don't quite get there, you've got to educate your team, not belittle them, but show them what it was that you were thinking, or let them know there's another way of doing something. Because it's when you do it yourself all the time and you're now relying on more people, you've got to get them educated on the expectation and how to get there.
Yeah. Well, talking about expectation and education, and I know we briefly talked about your history, and you said you were one of the first 10 in some sort of training program. So what was it like, mate? Was it like, Craig, was it all for yourselves? You kind of just went through the mistakes and things like that, and there was none of this live, life, build stuff.
There was none of this sort of stuff. So that training scheme that started, it was based around trying to keep apprentices employed. Now I'm not sure whether at the time my boss got a subsidy. Sometimes today there's subsidies. But I think he did it. I'm hoping he did it from a point that he was trying to make sure I finished my time. And look, he was a struggling builder, and he's bought a cabinet making shop thinking that was going to be his probably out. And I remember as an apprentice, Friday was payday. Him and his wife would be in the office all week in the shop. Friday lunchtime they'd leave and not come back. No check, to get paid. We're getting paid by checks. And then Monday they wouldn't come in, and then Tuesday they'd come in and write your check, and they'd date it for the next Friday. So he was doing things tough, like old builders who probably didn't understand margins and overheads and all those sort of things. And he probably had his finger in too many pies, and eventually it caught up. And they folded and they went down. So by being in that training company, they relocated me to another employer. So it was still just like doing a normal apprenticeship, but I wasn't indentured to him. He was like a host employer for me. So I was indentured to the training company, and they had to relocate me to somewhere else. And there was a bit of a downtime. They couldn't find someone. So I was actually in their office, painting their office for 2 weeks. Just to keep me employed because they were paying me. The training company. So I was really grateful for that.
That's cool.
But talking about no outside influences, you were an apprentice carpenter, and that's what you did, and you knew no different. There was no one trying to develop you or expand you.
There's no social media at the time, of course, and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we kind of look at what I admire about you, Craig, and when I talk to builders like you, is you look at builders nowadays, and I'm not saying it's an easier time. It's not an easier time, but you have a lot of stuff at your fingertips. And what's amazing about you, and what I wanted to ask was, going up through that era, mate, you wouldn't have had nothing. You had your builder that you work with. You had your training company, and then it was probably making mistakes and learning through them. And
it was, and I think the thing too is when I started working for myself, there was no one to ask. There was no one out there to ask, and I've always been big on doing research. So when I was 22, working for myself, and I go and meet some clients, and you start off small. I remember like one of the first jobs I did was a 2-story house in Caloundra that had 52 sets of casement windows. I took them all out, cleaned all the paint off the hinges, replaned them, refitted them, repainted them, the old slot head screws, taking them out, making them all work properly. And there was just days, weeks on end by yourself on a job site, just plodding through, but there was no one to ask for assistance. If there was something you didn't know, you had to muck your way through it. And so I took this bit of a philosophy that if someone asked me to do something, I'd never say no, whether I knew it or not.
That's cool.
Not let them know that I didn't know. And then I'd be, pulling out what we had, the Trade Act manuals, our timber manuals back then. Look, we didn't have Google and stuff.
They got ChatGPT now.
That's right. And I'd go and do some research and work it out, and maybe an odd bloke here or there, you might see at the hardware store, you might sort of just try and talk to them. But builders were very closed doors.
Yeah.
You know, they thought you were competition,
Yeah.
and they didn't want to talk to you. And,
Yeah,
and
wow.
I sort of found that difficult for a lot of years.
Yeah.
That people wouldn't open up and want to. That's why I'm big now on trying to help people and just tell them from my experience or things I've seen, or just a bit of advice along the way.
Yeah.
Just because I think the younger generation coming through will be better carpenters.
Yep.
If they get those few little insights and those few tips and tricks, that goes along the way.
100%.
And when I started out for myself, and then things got a bit quiet, and I put an ad in the paper, and I got a job with a guy. He was from Buderim at the time because I was still living on the sunny coast.
Yeah, wow.
And he was like a renovation specialist.
Yep.
This guy Brian, and he classed himself as a master craftsman.
Yeah.
And I worked for him about 6 months, and I said to him one day, "Why don't you ever do new homes, Brian?" And this is when the tradic industry was really taking off. The volume builders were really taking off.
Yep.
And he said to me, "I can't compete with those guys.
Yeah.
I don't want to compete with those guys."
Yeah.
And he specialised in the renovation world.
Yeah.
And the stuff that guy taught me was just next level.
Really?
Like he was really good, and he got me into the master builders.
Yeah.
So this is in 91.
Yeah.
So I've become a master builder, and then they had their AGM.
Yep.
And master builders have what they call a committee meeting, committee group, you know.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting elected in as a committee member.
Yeah, wow.
So you go to the committee meeting, not just the general meetings.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a bit of a funny thing because we got a letter from Brisbane head office to say that I couldn't be a committee member because I wasn't a builder. I was a carpenter. And in their constitution, you had to be a builder to actually be a committee member.
Yep.
So we had the constitution changed. So now in a committee, you can have builders and 2 contractors.
Yeah, wow.
So they changed the
you were part of that movement?
Yeah, in 91. And I've been a member of Master Builders since 1991 and a committee member ever since then.
91?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I've also been on what they call the RAT group, which is the Renovation and Technical Advisory Group.
Yep.
So they run out of Brisbane, and they shut that down about 18 months ago
Yeah.
because they didn't have the manpower to keep running it.
Yeah.
But I've been heavily involved
Bloody
in
hell.
that, and by going to those meetings and wanting to expand my knowledge is basically how I've managed to keep going through those early years of just mingling with a few of those guys. And of course, you were in the master builders, a few of those guys would talk to you.
Yep.
And that's the only way I managed to develop. Like, there was no Google to search stuff up and everything else.
That's phenomenal.
That's why I'm passionate about helping the younger.
You do now? Yeah. What a story. Like, we are legitimately sitting with somebody who made changes to the constitution of the building industry.
Yeah, that's right, mate. I never thought about it like that.
Everybody, that's freaking cool. Craig Stuart, mate. Like, I didn't actually expect that. That wasn't part of the script. Anyway, well, mate, nowadays, now that you're kind of working, it's a different environment, and you've got guys like Dwayne and stuff like that. How do you find those sorts of programs? You know, the Dwayne Pearce. How do you find Level Up and?
Mate, I couldn't speak highly enough of it.
Yeah, cool.
You know, I really couldn't, and I think it's the communication, the networking, is just like-minded people.
Yeah.
Now, we went to a thing yesterday with the Level Up group, or with the Live Like Build group.
Yep.
Paula Baker Laporte. We had a session with her yesterday about the healthy homes and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then last night we went to one of the other members' houses and we had a barbecue.
Yeah.
And I had 2 other guys in my car that come from the other side of Australia. You know, and we were chatting and we were talking between ourselves, saying, how amazing is this, that as builders from different parts of the country, we're talking together like we're mates. There's no animosity between where your business is and where my business is. No. We collaborate. We talk about techniques, styles that we do, methodologies on how we build, and it's all about improving ourselves and improving what we deliver as a product. Yeah. And 10 years ago, that was not a thing. Yeah. You know, that definitely was not a thing. I remember going to meetings and having builders like look at me in the room, especially when I was younger. Yeah. Thinking, who the hell are you? Yeah. You know, what are you doing here? Do you deserve? And you felt like, do I deserve to sit in this room with these builders? Yeah. It's getting that seat at the table, isn't it? Yeah. And the respect. Yeah, it is the respect, you know. And when I moved back to Gympie, when I got married, and started going to the local master builders, because there's a real cliquey little group in the Gympie, you know, and you're sitting there and you're on the outside, and you get the eyes and the feels, and you sort of think, but I got a right to be there as much as they do. Yeah. You got a lot of valid things to say. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You know, and probably my saving grace there was that the Gympie Master Builders is like a sister of the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah.
So the regional manager that runs both of them, because I was so heavily involved in the Sunny Coast at the time, he knew me. So when I went to Gympie and up there, he would include me.
Yeah.
And these other builders look at you going, who the hell is he?
Yeah.
But because I had that previous connection, it would have been even more difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas today, builders are starting to talk.
Yeah.
And everyone here in this room is here because they want to learn, grow, develop, and improve themselves.
Yeah.
And I think Dwayne has a good thing is like you've got to get yourself right.
Yeah.
To get your business right.
Yeah.
And it's that mindset.
Yep.
And it's those little pointers that people tell you that you don't actually know. And when someone tells you like this aha moment, how simple is that?
Yeah.
Because someone didn't physically tell it to you, you just didn't know.
No. So what would be one of those things, Craig? What's one of the things? I know he does talk a lot about like personal development and mindset. I'm big on it too.
Yes.
And I think it's phenomenal. What are some of the things like that?
I think the biggest thing is personal development.
Yeah, cool.
Okay? Because if you're getting yourself right, and you feel good, and you want to get out of bed in the morning, and you're motivated, well, then you're motivated to do stuff. Whereas I think we tend to push things aside that are a bit hard.
Yeah.
So face the hard things.
Yeah.
Bring them in, get them done.
Yeah.
Easy things are even easier.
Yeah. That's so cool.
And like I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
As a builder that works on the tools, works in the office.
Yeah.
Where's your passion? Like your tools is your passion.
Yeah.
So you're never taught when you get a builder's license to be a business.
That's it.
You're never taught to be a business.
Yep.
And it's easy for me to say now because I got my builder's license, but I think you should do like 10 years in the trade.
Yep.
And then there should be like a course that teaches you to not stop being a tradesman, but start to think as a business.
Yeah.
Because most people evolve.
Yeah.
And they just evolve through and they sort of get into this position. So you start your apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And you're good at it, you're passionate.
Yeah.
You work your way up to the leading hand or the supervisor. And then when you go across to being the builder, there is no education on business side of it.
No.
You're still thinking like a tradesman.
Yeah.
And running a business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where these things today are educating us.
Yeah.
And collaborating with us and giving us the tools.
Yeah. Help out a lot.
I'll say about Live Life Build again because I think it's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And there is other platforms out there as well.
Yeah.
But it's learning your numbers, your profit and your overhead.
Yeah.
Like people don't understand that.
No.
And the big one, and I think I've heard you guys talk about this before, is even today in the industry, it's the cost plus 10%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where'd 10% ever come from?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, and I'm guilty of it. I did it for years and years. I remember the first time I put 15% on a job, I felt guilty.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's because you're a carpenter working in the business and you're pulling a wage or taking leftover money, you think you're doing okay.
Yeah.
But your business isn't doing okay.
No. No, and you never know what's going to happen because you think about all the things that impact building, like Dwayne just said before. I'm not a builder, Craig, as you know. I'm a frustrated builder. I wanted to be a builder, but I'm never going to get there now. I'm too old, but I love hanging out with dudes like you.
Thank you.
Dwayne's like, it's the hardest industry in the world. Like, it really is.
Yeah.
Rain comes, it's blown out. You don't have that right buffer.
That's right.
And things like that. That costs you every day. You're in for some. So you've got to be really, like your pre-construction, like you said, all your costing and quoting and things, you've got to be really right on that stuff. Hey,
yeah, you do, definitely. And it's a fine line. And you got to look at a breakdown of a week and a month and then the project because you might, by knowing your numbers and where things are, things might be costing you more in the front end. Okay. But then you can start to look at where you can save some money as you're going back.
Yeah.
And keeping variations up to date, keeping time extensions for weather and all those sort of things and understanding them as you get more business minded and implement those in the business runs better, more cost effective. And in the big picture, it's better overall.
Yeah.
But it is challenging. It's challenging every day.
Yeah. I love what you said about, becoming a builder and there has to be some sort of, not has to be, but it would be nice if there was some sort of course or something to turn them from a chippy and a builder to a businessman or woman. Yeah. Because, I
honestly believe that we do need something.
Yeah.
Because you do a managerial course.
You do.
So my managerial course was a one-day thing.
Yeah.
I think it might be 3 or 4 days now where you go and do a managerial course.
Yeah,
I think you might even do it online.
Yep.
And that then enables you to apply for a builder's license. Obviously, you got some history in the trade and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't tell you margins, overheads, how to schedule, how to program, even just using a planner to schedule your job.
Yeah.
Like I remember for years, you'd get a set of plans off a client, you'd quote it, you'd win a job, you'd sign a contract, you'd start.
Yeah.
It's in your head.
Yeah.
My schedule was in my head.
Wow.
I just say to the boys, oh yeah, well we're digging footings on this day and we're stealing this and concrete slabs going in that day.
Yeah.
And you just keep telling the boys what you're doing. There's nothing
Yeah.
actually on paper.
Yeah.
Because it's in your head.
Yeah, wow.
But needing to change those.
Yeah.
And have a schedule set out, you know, where you can show it to your team.
Yeah.
And show them this is where things are going to happen and how it's going to happen. Makes a difference. And I think it includes your team more.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, okay. Do builders have a tendency not to, you think, Craig? Like, is it because it's in your head sometimes and you kind of...
I think so.
Yeah.
And that comes back to business skills.
Yeah, and it comes... Look, and to be honest, I think it's not just builders. It comes back to a lot of business men and women who start their own businesses. You've got to get the process out of your head and become a leader.
Yes.
A bit and put it, you know, be able to communicate with your team about how things are done. And like you said right at the beginning, what's the standard? How do we do things?
Yes.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Setting expectations for your client and your team is one of my big things.
Yeah, cool, Craig. Well, mate, talking about the younger generation, if you could, and I know you do, you talk to lots and you probably mentor many builders, but if you could help the younger builders with one thing, what would it be? What do you think they need to know? This is on the spot, mate. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Overheads and margins.
Overheads and margin, yeah.
Yep.
Hard to understand.
Yep, hard to understand. Understand what their overhead cost is.
Yep.
And factor every little thing in, your phone, your car repayments, your services of your vehicle.
Yeah.
You know, all those things that you don't think about, that it's taking money out of the business.
Yeah, cool.
You know, because and the other big one I would say is when you're quoting the unforeseen carpentry costs that people don't think about, which is unloading the truck, cleaning up the job site, moving material around.
Yep.
We're working on this side of the house today, cladding. Tomorrow we're on the other side of the house. We're going to pick up a whole heap of cladding, take it around, put it on stools, those sort of things.
Yeah.
Because we think about, well, we can build the frame in a week. It only takes me 3 days to clad the house, but all of a sudden it's taking you 4 because you haven't allowed for the cleanup and moving and depending on the job site, like some job sites, all the gear gets dropped on the street, and you got to cart it all in.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you lost 3 hours for 3 or 4 guys,
and it's all time.
It's all time,
all costs,
which is all coming off the bottom line. So I think the 2 main important things is overhead margin will be one.
Yep.
And then unforeseen carpentry costs.
Freaking legend. Thank you.
When you break your job down.
Yeah.
And the scary part is you put the numbers on paper, and you look at it and you think, holy shit, that's expensive. But it's not for you to decide if the job's expensive. It's for the client to decide.
Yeah.
You need to be charging what it costs to do the job, to do it properly.
Yeah.
And then collaborate with the client on how you meet their project spend.
Yep.
And another big one, I think, is understanding their project spend.
Yeah.
So it's not budget, it's project spend.
Yeah.
Because the project spend is the whole job.
Yeah.
So let's just say we're doing a new build.
Yep.
And there could be landscaping in a pool, which may or may not be part of your scope of work.
Yeah.
But that could be, let's just say the client has got 500,000 and they want to put a pool in that's being done externally. You need to take that money from their 500. You haven't got 500.
Yeah.
You might only have 400.
Yeah.
So understanding where that comes from.
Yeah.
And how that works.
Yeah, wow.
And then that collaboration, working with that client, is
Yeah.
getting the right result.
Yeah.
And them understanding what they can get for their money.
Yeah.
And how they get it.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I don't want to dig too deep in how you do it, Craig, because you've given so much value to all our listeners today, mate. But do you have a framework around that? You know how to do it properly, and
so we do the pre-construct.
Yeah.
So what I do is I meet with a client. So the client will reach out, they'll fill out a questionnaire, and then we sort of through that decide whether it's someone that we might want to work with.
Yeah,
and in the questionnaire we ask them, have they built before? Are they talking to other builders? What their project spend is, and demographic and what they're looking for and all those sort of things, whether it's a reno or a new build or whatever.
Yeah.
And then from there we'll have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And I'll explain to them that we have systems and processes in place that we do things a bit different than other builders.
Yeah.
That we'll do the pre-construction, the pack process, which is paid as a consultant.
Yep.
And then I do what I call a meet and greet.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I offer the clients an hour and a half of my time.
Yeah. Wow.
That I will meet with them, whether it's at their house on a block of land, and have a face-to-face and see if I think that we are compatible.
Yep.
And if we're on the same line.
Wow.
Because we're sort of specialising now in more healthy performing homes.
Yeah.
So I try to get my clients to go that way as well.
Yep.
And just the education part of it.
Yeah.
And then from there we'll do a pre-construct, which is a set fee that they will pay us up front.
Yep.
To be involved in different stages of the project, to get to a preliminary costings and all those sort of things.
Do many builders usually charge for that, Craig, or they don't?
There's more builders doing it now.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely should be.
And through Live Life Build, we're sort of educated through that,
That's
and we're
good.
pack process trained and all this sort of stuff on how that all works.
Yep.
And I say to clients, you can probably go down the road and get a free quote of somebody.
Yep.
But will they give you the depth and the detail that I'm giving you?
Yeah.
So we won't do a job unless it's a pre-construction process.
Rightly so.
And whether it's a bathroom reno to an architectural design, it's a pre-construction.
It protects you and it protects the client.
It does.
I think it certainly does, because you have these builders that do free quotes and things like that. And I've worked for a few volume builders. It always blows out.
It always does. But also, you've set expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
In the pre-construct form, it tells them what they're going to get.
Yep.
The other one with it too is, we've got a designer that we work with.
Yeah.
And I get him. So just to explain it, any what I call third-party external, whether it's an engineer, architect, energy efficiency, soil test, we coordinate it. The clients pay for that direct. They don't pay me for it. They pay that direct, because that's a separate entity.
Yep.
But it's all encapsulated.
Yep.
And we coordinate the whole thing.
Yep.
But we sort of did a job where the designer, like 4 and 5, 6 times, he's doing like changes to the plan.
Yeah.
So now we actually stipulate there's 3 changes. So the client knows that we do a design, we have a meeting about it, we make a change, we do some pre-construction costings along the way.
Yeah.
If they want to get into 5 and 6 different amendments to the plans, it's going to cost them extra money.
Yeah.
So you're setting expectations again. Yep. They also start to treat you as a professional.
Yeah.
And they also realise that your time now costs money.
That's right.
So in my pre-construct, they know how much of my time I'm going to allocate to getting to a stage. And that doesn't necessarily mean in hours.
Yeah.
It means I'll give them 2 pre-construction prelim costings.
Yep.
There's 3 meetings with the designer.
Yep.
And these sort of things.
Yeah.
If it's a renovation job, we go to their house, I take the plumber, the electrician, we do a in and out as much as we can, in the roof, underneath. So we're giving them as much informed information as we can, so that they can make the right decision.
Yep.
So that's really important.
Yeah.
You build a relationship. The client's invested because they've paid you for something.
Yeah.
They don't waste your time as much.
No.
Because they know that once they reach the limit, you're now going to start charging them extra or do an add-on to it. And you've also built a relationship.
Yeah.
So by the time it comes to build their job, you've got this nice relationship. Yeah. You're on the same page. If you come up with a problem in a renovation, an unforeseen, they also now start to respect your input and listen to what you say and trust you and not just think you're trying to stick another 10 grand on them because you've shortchanged them somewhere. You missed something. It gives us the ability to break the whole job down and find as many unforeseens as possible in the job. I mean, obviously you can't sing in the ground. But let's just say you get a set of plans, it's a renovation, there's an extension going on the back and there's a beam to go in. You open the wall up and there's nothing to sit it on. Well, if we've done the pre-construct, we've already cut a hole in their wall, had a look, designed it into it, had the steel post structurally designed. It's now a cost. So it's a cost that's included. And I learnt a lot of that with the guy who did a lot of renovations with Brian. He had an incredible mind. Like, and back then, he used to run an A4 folder on the job site, and all the renovation connections and beams and things, he had them all hand-drawn, how they all went together. This is way before computers and tablets and stuff like that were happening, But the pre-construct is really valuable. Very, very valuable.
Mate, that's super cool. Thank you so much for letting the audience know, there's some great tips that you just went through and gave it away for builders, mate. So now what's the plans for Craig Stuart Building? What's happening now, mate? You get into more high-performing homes?
So now I'm going down the rabbit hole of high-performing, healthier. So high-performing, I'm not looking at the passive. I don't think the passive house in Queensland is a big thing at this point in time. In the colder climates, I see where it comes from.
Absolutely.
But just the healthy performing and higher performance, understanding that the products we're using and how they perform long-term, as in what glues are being used, and giving the clients the opportunity to have a decision on what goes in their house. And I think just the way we insulate, the way we wrap, the way we do moisture, air tightness. Look, for 20 years, I felt the way we installed windows was wrong. I've always felt that. And probably just doing a little bit extra, but we would wrap the outside of the house in the paper, make sure it was nice and tight, make sure it had the right overlaps, and then we'd run straight over the windows, cut it out, fold it in on the bottom, and try and protect the frame, because the frame is the skeleton of your house. So a brick veneer house, the bricks aren't the strength. It's in the frame. So why cut the paper short and potentially get a bit of moisture around the aluminium window and the brickwork onto your timber frame.
Exactly.
Or don't run the paper all the way to the top plate, stop at the soffit line.
Yeah.
And another interesting one is insulation.
Yeah.
If you miss 5% of your insulation, you lose 35% efficiency.
Oh, wow.
So think about this. You're building a house.
Yep.
Frames are up.
Yep.
Paper's on the outside. It's clattered.
Yeah.
Plaster's coming in. We're putting in the insulation. We're putting it all between the studs. What about when the window got installed and there's a 10 mil gap all the way around between the window reveal and the frame?
Yeah.
Or what about where a connecting wall meets an external wall and you can't fill the pocket on the outside of that junction?
Yeah, wow.
So 5% loss, 35% inefficiency.
Wow.
You know? So doing the 1% extra, getting the job
makes
done properly.
A huge difference.
So educating my team and my clients on getting that to work, and now we're going down the, building biology.
Yeah.
And I'm getting more and more involved and intrigued and understanding. So my passion is now getting into how this house comes together and how it performs.
Yeah.
And, we have this saying that we build sick houses, and not sick from that's a good point. As in, it makes people sick.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like counterbattens on the outside, forming an air cavity where there's a heat stack, getting a ventilation happening properly.
Yeah.
Now, as an apprentice, all our soffits are ventilated.
Yeah.
Our soffits aren't ventilated anymore. As in times evolved, we've got quicker and better, but we're also getting worse.
Yeah.
The craftsmanship's being lost.
Yeah.
But putting together very quickly.
Yeah.
Is also then creating other problems.
Yeah.
They might look pretty.
Yeah.
But long-term jeopardy isn't there.
That's it. And you talked about that, Craig. You talked about, these homes that are lasting for 20, 25 years and what's up with that.
Yeah, well, I think the expected life expectancy of a house, 20, 25 years. Now, if you've just spent 20 years paying off the house and then, it doesn't have any more life left in it, and they're going to crush it up and put it in the ground, we've got a landfill problem.
We do.
But our grandfathers were building houses 100 years ago that are still standing.
Yeah.
So why can't we go back to some of those trades, as in the skill and the craftsmanship, and just build a bit better?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. And we've got different markets. We've got the first home buyer try and get in, and everything's getting more expensive.
Yeah.
But if everyone did 1% better, and the other one that I use, Aaron, is that if you're building to code, you're building at the bare minimum.
Yeah, wow.
And the life expectancy of the code is going to change for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
So within 3 years, what you built today no longer meets code.
Yeah.
So why don't we build a little bit better than code?
Yeah.
Because that's the bottom line.
Cool.
If you meet code, you've just made...
It's just bare minimum.
You just got to cross the line. So why don't we do a little bit extra?
Yeah. I wish a lot of builders had your mentality, mate. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what it's about, and what you guys do and putting it out there.
Yeah.
There will be younger guys, and there'll be some older guys that go, oh, what a load of bloody bull and that sort of stuff. But the younger ones coming through are the ones we need to educate and just get them to put a little bit better finishes on.
Yeah.
Now, one of my podcasts we did with Dwayne, or two of the podcasts, was called Tips and Tricks.
Yeah.
Just around old carpentry skills and little tips and tricks that are being lost. And I've actually had people reach out to me from the podcast and ask me questions. And there's a young guy on the other side of Australia. He's a young chippy, and he contracts. And he messages me every so often and says to me, mate, how do I do this? Or how do I make this better? And, all these sort of things. And there is people out there that want to improve
so cool.
what they do.
Yeah.
And I sort of just believe that when I'm gone, like, who else is going to put it out there?
Yeah.
So whatever knowledge I've got and I can share, I try to, inspire them to say, hey, guys, we can do better.
Yeah.
And if everyone inspires a little bit, the industry only gets better. And it's the clients who win at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
As builders get better and do a better job, the product lasts longer.
Yeah.
And it may cost a little bit more now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better costing more and lasting longer?
100%, Craig. I'm fully with you. Mate, it's you offer so much to the industry, and I do just have one last question for you, Craig, and it's always our last question on the pod, mate, and I think you epitomise what a good builder is, but what do you think makes a good builder?
I think there's a couple of things. My mind shift has changed in the last few years, because if you had to ask me 10 years ago, I would have told you it's all about the product. The nice miters, and straight walls and all those sort of things. But what you got to remember is you could be the best builder in Australia. You could have a messy job site and unhappy clients, and they aren't going to take their friends through and say, look how good this miter is on this architrave. So that's a key factor. But the other part of it is being a good builder is running a good business,
Yep.
communication with your client,
Yep.
and keeping them informed.
Mate.
So I think there's two parts to it.
Yep.
Is workmanship and craftsmanship is very important.
Yep.
But also having the other side of it where you've got happy clients.
Yeah.
Because unhappy clients
Yeah.
aren't going to reflect a good build.
Yeah.
Something
100%.
something I say to my team
Yeah.
is that you could be the best chippy in Australia
Yeah.
and run a messy job site,
Yep.
and the clients will turn up and will find fault.
Yeah.
Because when they walk in, they don't know what's wrong. They feel uneasy, uncomfortable. They're stepping over blocks of timber. We're out the front. There's just rubbish everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? You could be an average chippy
Yep.
and have a really clean job site. The clients will come in, feel happy, feel excited,
Yeah.
not looking for problems
Yeah.
because the way they feel.
Yeah.
And what I say also is that clients don't always know what the problem is,
Yep.
but they just feel it.
Yeah.
You know? And it's
Yeah.
coming into the renovation world.
Yeah.
This is a hard one to teach young carpenters. Sometimes you've got to be wrong to be right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay? So,
How does that work?
okay, so take this example. An old Queenslander
Yep.
predominantly leans to the south.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Because the northern storms are the worst storms with the most force.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
over the years, they will move.
Yeah.
And so you're doing a renovation on an old Queenslander
Yeah. Wow.
and might have 3 metre ceilings that's 30 mil plumb.
Yep.
As soon as you put that extension on, or you put the veranda on that first corner post or whatever,
Yeah.
and you put it on plumb,
Yep.
and the client can cite that against the house is not wrong, you are. Okay, so what you might have to do is fudge that post and put it 15 mil out of plumb. Or marry it together, or find
Yeah.
a happy medium,
Yep.
right? So that when they look at it, it looks right,
Yep.
but it's wrong.
Yeah.
So it's the marrying of the two together to give
Mate.
the illusion that it's right.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mate, that was super cool.
Yeah.
Craig. Well, mate, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Thank you for having me, mate.
I am going to use everybody. Is it Craig Good? I'm hoping the next podcast we do is Craig Good, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And we were going to visit, hopefully if you allow us, mate, I want to visit some of your builds.
Yes.
I want to take Elisa through and we'll do a few videos and show the
I
audience
would love to have you on site, mate.
how a legend of a builder does it. And yeah, we'll see you up on Gympie and the Sunshine Coast, mate.
Much appreciated. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for having
much.
me, mate. Appreciate it.
Mate, that was awesome.
Thank you.